Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of the wine barrel build. It's a patio table at bar height. So here we are back in the shop, and here's our barrel that we're working with, and I have 2 coats of spar varnish on it now. Look at that grain. That's coming out really nicely. So what we'll be doing today, we'll be putting an apron on that we built the other day. And there's the apron on the outside which will support the tabletop. And there's a dry fit on it. And it fits really nice and snug around the barrel. So I made some marks from, so we've made it level onto the barrel. And it fits really nice and snug. I'll be putting some screws in the bottom to stabilize it, and I'll also show you later how we've done that. But so I've taken it off after we've dry fitted it to make sure it's good, and gave it a sand. So we sanded it up really nice and did the edges and the bottom side as well. So what we'll do now is I've made some score marks there. You can see that's a center line down the center. So when we're laying up the slats will be going on to cover that. We'll be putting cedar on top of that. So we'll take that off now and proceed with the other section. And what I'll do is I'll coat that as well. So it'll be all coated with spar varnish too. It's cypress is the product that we use to make that with. And here we're just planing some cedar. We want this all a uniform thickness, so we're just planing it, and this will be our top. And there's one of the top pieces off the top. The angle's done. I figured out the angle that we needed. It's a 12-degree angle through the center of the board, and I've cut 18-inch long boards. We'll be trimming them off later. I'm just building a sled here for it. This is a sled that will be going on a bandsaw. So I'm just using a piece of scrap plywood here. And I've got a center line there marked and the angle. So we'll marry that on top of it and just put a couple of stop blocks and push blocks. We'll have to make 2 block areas because you're going to have a right piece and a left piece. So we'll do all one side, and then we'll have to flip the piece over and do the other side. So here I am just laying up on mark again on top, and I transferred some lines onto the square piece so I can line it up against the line that I put there, and then I can just put some stop blocks. So there's one there, so that's for the angle, and then a push block on the end of it. And the only thing about these is when you're doing it, it's really important that you make sure that your miter saw or whatever you're cutting these are on it's good and square. So when you're cutting them, because that push block will determine where the board sits. So that sits in nice. And here we are with the bandsaw, just cutting off the pieces off the side. You see how nicely that works and slides off. There's a piece there. So we just get all these done on the right elevation, and then we'll put another stop block on the left elevation. You can see here that I'm pulling the board back through the bandsaw. I don't usually like pulling stuff back through the blade because you can pull the blade off the bandsaw. The blades are expensive, especially for big saws. But I'm basically doing this because I didn't want to get in front of the camera. So if you do this, be careful pulling wood backwards. We just get this bunch all cut up, and then we can proceed with the other side. There's another angle that just shows you. So this is the left elevation of the board. You can see how I've made another block there, and that just resets for the other angle. Get these all done, and then we'll take them to the sander. shows you again. So that's the opposite angle. This is the safest way of doing it. So if you have a bandsaw, just set up a sled. It doesn't have to go into the slide rails. They can just be up against the fence. So here I am on the big sander, just airsing the edges and cleaning up the sides of the boards. You see I've got a stop block there in the end, so I'll just clean them up and airsing the edges. And this makes for a quick job. I didn't have to set up the router or the shaper to shape the edges, and they only need to be sanded a bit. These machines do a fabulous job on edge sanding products. So now they're all sanded, and I've set them on top of the apron. So the apron is underneath, so this is how they get fitted. So I'm just checking them to make sure I've got enough cut and checking them for the angle. I'll be having a 1/4 inch gap between each board, and I'll be sorting the boards out too. You can see I just randomly grab them all, but what I wanted to do is divide up all the colors. I picked some lighter materials and some darker materials, so I want to mix that all up so it's a random color palette all over the top. It's all mixed up. We don't want to go with the same color tones. So on the back side of the apron, this is the underside now. What I've done is I've drilled holes and countersunk them, and I've gone right through the spleen and into the other substrate below it, so it locks in the spleen in the joint. Not sure if it needed it or not. It's the glue has done a really good job, but it's always good if you can to put a mechanical fastener into it. So you can see those have gone right through. I've used an 1.5 screw, so it goes right through the other side. Here's a couple of Kreg screws, and these are exterior porcelain coated screws, so they're in 4 spots on the bottom. And once we get this fitted onto the barrel, I'll fasten it with those. And I also had a brass screw there. You've noticed that's a placement screw. I'll screw a brass screw on the barrel when I get that fitted to make sure that it lines up in the same place all the time. So here I'm just scribing the top of the pieces up against the barrel, and I'll do a couple of them at a time, and then just hanging on to it and doing a couple of countersinks into the bottom, and then we'll fasten that on. I used 3 screws per board that's coming out. Just checking them for depth to make sure it's not too long. Sometimes you pull out a longer screw in a bag, so the odd one looks too long, sometimes throw it away. And I set up the bandsaw at a 6-degree angle. So as we're measuring these, I take them over the bandsaw and just cut off the scribe, and it's angled as well. You see there how it fits right up against the barrel. It fits up quite nice. And this is a slower process, but it's the only real way to do it. You can't do this off the barrel. And I didn't want to take the chance of cutting all the staves at one time, so I'd rather do a couple at a time and space them and put them on and just follow it all the way around. You can see the sun's out. It's kind of nice working in the sun. Open up the door to the shop. Here we are, just following it around. I haven't screwed this apron in yet, but it's really stable on the barrel. Because of the barrel, it basically wedges onto the barrel. There's a picture of it there, and you can see how we're following it all the way around and describe them as we go. And what I end up doing too is I actually put a couple of pieces of wood on a pair of vice grips to hold them in place. They're getting too hard to hold in place and drill at the same time, so I've just took some hot melt glue and a couple of pieces of plywood and fastened it to the ends of the vice grip, because I didn't want to mar the wood. When working with cedar, it mars quite easy, so instead of having trying to find a sacrificial board all the time, I just cut a couple of pieces of plywood and put them on it. It worked out really good, and I could fit the board, just give it a clamp, pre-drill my holes, and away I went. So now we're back at the big table. And what I've done is I've hot melted a glue in the center, and then I found the center mark with and then just put a screw in there, and then used a marker to go around and mark the outside radius. And I put in some stopper blocks there too to stop the ring from moving around as much. You can see that, and I use the hot melt glue a lot in the shop whenever we're doing forms or doing patterns, but it just knocks off. So you're not screwing into your table, but I just glue them down onto the table. So we're just going along here, and we'll get this all done. This is the easiest way. I'm using the jigsaw there. There it is, nice and round. And now I'll just take the sander and airs the edge. So I've gone all the way around. I'll airs the top and then the bottom and the sides as well. I'll just take that fur off the sides from the cutting of the jigsaw. And then I'll take a palm sander to this and soften up everything and sand the top, as if there's marks or any oil from my hands or anything. So we'll sand all the top of this as well. But it's all fastened down now, so each one of those boards you see had 3 screws in it that were countersunk. Here's the barrel there. So we've done a finish coat on it now, so that's 3 coats. And then I'll put one more touch-up coat on the top of it. And I've painted my bands as well too. So what I wanted was a flat black, so I've used stovepipe paint. It's a nice flat black. I wanted the black to stand out from the shinier barrel, and I think that looks good. And you notice the screws I have, they're a hex self-drilling number 10 screw. And there's the end of the barrel. And so I've got marks on the bottom of it there, and that's the placement of the legs. This barrel is going to be elevated on legs, as you've seen in the pictures. And so I want to know where the legs were. So I measured out the legs first, and I put a piece of tape on the bottom so I know. So you can remember where the bottom is. Sometimes in a barrel when you're cutting away, you'll get moved around and forget where the bottom is. But so our legs are marked out in the bottom side, and there's our package of screws. So I'll be putting some screws in it. And I've got the door laid out there now, so I've used painter's tape and just marked out the doors. And to do these bands, it's these self-drilling hex head screws. These are number 10s, work really well. And I make sure that I'm only 1 screw per stave and right in the center of the stave. You don't want to put 2 in it, because they'll crack as it shrinks or expands, and you only want to put them in the very center. I see some people like to pre-drill all their holes and everything. Well, with these self-drilling heads, you actually don't need to do that. You can just place your screw and drill right in. It saves a lot of time, and it's very accurate. And I like the nice big broad heads. The other one jumps off too, but and I'm doing them all here in a row. But what I'll do, you'll notice I have some screws down the side, so I've gone all the way around and have put a screw at 4 points around the barrel, and then you can screw, fill the areas in between. If you don't do that and you try to go all the way around the barrel, you'll end up creating a slack because you're actually stretching the steel as you're going. So just sort of place it and then follow all the way around and fill in the areas. So here we are, we're about to cut out the door. So what I'll do is cut the metal first. And I'm just using a side grinder here with a zip blade on it. And I'll try and make it a little bit bigger for the jigsaw blade to go through. So I've cut it a couple of times to create a little bit of clearance there for the jigsaw blade. And same on this side. Just blew off the tape, but we know where it is. And so I'll have to take out a few of the bolts. That's where we're putting the hinge plate. So what I've done is, where you're putting the hinge plate, that's where you want to drill your hole for your jigsaw blade to go in, because you can hide it behind the plate. So there's my jigsaw, so I'll just go around and jigsaw that out. You want to make sure you have a really good blade, a sharp blade. This oak is extremely hard. I was surprised. I thought maybe, with being outside and the moisture and everything, but through time and it was really hard, and the jigsaw is the perfect tool. And I stayed with the same angle as the barrel because when I cut this door out, I want it to wedge in so that it'll drop in like a wedge and not have, not to want to fall on the inside. It should be able to support itself within the opening. So I'm just following the contour of the barrel. But the lines, I went vertically because I didn't follow the curvature of the barrel. I just pulled it, I tacked the tape on top and then just pulled it straight and then followed it all the way down, because whenever we put in the hinge plates, we want a nice straight line. It's imperative to have that, or the door won't open properly. So I drew the door with the radius as well too. I like the round radius. It sort of follows the line of the barrel. I'll have to stop here now and pull out the hex head screws there, because they'll be in the way of the jigsaw. That only takes a minute. We can pull those out and then pop them right back in again. But didn't want to go bouncing over the top of that. So once we get those out, we can continue back to cutting and get the rest of this cut out and fit it in, and then we can start on our hinges. So, and I cut right up against the band. I didn't want a gap in between. Just following that all the way around, and that should just pop right out. You'll see a small piece of the stave drop out when I get to the corner, because I didn't want to put a screw in it. When I get that out, I'll put a couple of pins in it and some glue, a little bit of epoxy to hold it on. It's a little narrow to be putting a screw in. But there's our entrance into the bottom of the barrel, so the table will have storage in the bottom of it. And the smell is incredible. Whenever I opened this up and got into it, and the smell of the wine just stays in the barrel. It was quite nice. I'll just measure out now for our hinge plates. So I mount the backer plate on the barrel first, and then I'll mount it on the door. I'll put the door in and up against it, and then measure my marks and transfer it to the door. What I use is door hinges, wide door hinges. You want them wide enough so that you can follow the curvature of the barrel. So there's it just sitting in. And like I said, because it's wedged, it just sits right in. So there's backer blocks on my doors when I cut them out. A lot of people just use the metal in the front, but your door will distort through time and it'll swell. So what I do is I put in a block that you can screw to, and they have to be rounded and beveled at the same time, so that they're a compound curve. There we've just measured out the door hinges they'll be going in, and I've so when I tacked them on and brought them to the height, I actually drilled some holes too, and then I just used one of the Japanese trim saws, and I just cut. So we're going to cut this in 1/4 of an inch into the barrel. I won't be datoing the door on the barrel. I'll just be doing the barrel itself. So I'll be cutting that out with a chisel. And I've done my saw cuts, and they should just snap right off. You need a good sharp chisel for this. Like I said, this oak is quite hard, and it's a good time to learn how to sharpen your chisels. So we just get that snapped out, and then we can get our hinge plates on. So it's important that when you get this out, is that these are perfectly flat for the door to sit up against. You don't want them humped or anything. And it's something that you have to do by a chisel. It'd be too hard to get in here with a router or anything. So just some good old-fashioned carpentry works good. And just peel that back, shave it off a bit until you get all the tabs off, and you can get in there and fit the hinge. And it's actually a pleasant place to work with the fumes coming out onto you. You can see the crystallization of the wine in the bottom of the barrel. I just love that color of the inside of the barrels. I'll be installing a light on the inside of this as well too, but it'll be a battery light, a battery supported LCD light. For the amount of times it's used, it will be good enough. I'm going to see if I can fit it with a door latch, so when you open up the door, it comes on. Or if there's a light that's available once you open the door, it comes on. Either or. And it's just basically to illuminate the inside of the barrel so that you can see that beautiful purple of the wine. We don't get whiskey barrels too often around here. So here I am putting the door hinges on, and that's something that takes some time, and you want to make sure that they're perfectly parallel to each other on both sides, on the top and on the sides. If you notice here, the straight edge that I'm using lays straight across the top, and on the back side it lays flat up against them. So if you have to reset your hinge a little bit more or twist it to make that happen, you have to fit the hinges in, because it's very important that these align to each other. If they're not, your door won't open properly or swing right. This door, when it's finished, just swung really easy. And I'm just going to use a wide hinge too, so that you can, because if you notice the back hinge towards the bottom of the barrel, it has to be about that 1/4 inch higher or 3/8 higher. And all I'm doing is putting the screws back in it. I had the holes all pre-drilled, so it goes back in the same place where it was originally laid in. And then what I've done is I'll just take the door, and I fitted the door onto it and just made marks for the hinges, and I fastened the hinges to the door. And once I get the door fitted, I left a couple of the screws out so I can knock around the hinges to get them in place. You always do that, so if you have to tap them or something, you get some movement in them. But it actually slides in pretty good. This is the first fitting, so I was pretty happy with that. So it fits in good. And actually how I did the placement, I actually put the hinges on, and then I put a couple of dabs of hot melt glue on the hinges, and then fitted the door onto the hinge and just waited for a minute for the glue to set, and then bang the hinge pins out, and slowly took the door off, and the hinge plates stuck to the door with the hot melt glue. So that's a good trick to know, because it's pretty hard to measure where you put these. So I've just gone to get the hinge pins and pop those in, and then we can change out the screws. I put a little bit of grease on the hinge pins. It's probably the only time these pins will ever be out, so I like using grease rather than oil. So those are in. I'll just snap them in. Now they're tight, so they're going to live there. And once the door closes nice, just give it a couple of slams to fit in before I put in the final screws. And there's your plates, and they're good and tight. Then I'll put in the rest of the screws. The same thing, I left one screw out on both hinges on the door side and on the barrel, so I'll fasten those and get them in. That'll stay like that. It won't lose its form because it's screwed and glued to the compound curved pieces that I did on the inside of the door. So there, I've changed out the top of the temporary screws and put in small leg bolts. Those are number 14. I painted them black as well. So I'm just changing them out right now, and I decided to go with black instead of silver on the door. It just blends in with the door. And I'll eventually build a custom bong plug for the hole. So there it is there. It's upside down now. We're getting prepared to put the legs on. There's the door open up. And once I've had the door on, then I spar varnished all around the door and all the inside, so it's all coated and weatherproof as well, but it's upside down right now. So there's the door on and the legs on too. So part 4 will be the legs and the top. You can see the top's on. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.